Ethan moved quietly through the ruined city streets. Broken buildings stood like empty shells under a gray sky. He tried not to think about how many friends he had lost here. His boots crunched on the ground, and he looked around carefully. The war had changed everything. Humans had fought against the Zareth for many years. There was hardly any food left, and water was hard to find. People hid during the day and moved at night. Ethan was one of the last defenders of this city, and he carried something very special. At his side hung a sword, not just any sword, but a weapon made long ago in the early days of the war. It was said to have a final power, one last strike that could not be blocked or stopped. Ethan touched the hilt of the sword to make sure it was still there. He felt its weight and remembered the promise he had made. His father had given him the sword when he was just a boy, telling him to use it only when there was no other choice. The old stories said the sword's last strike could change the world, but it would disappear forever after. Ethan did not know if the stories were true. Still, he carried it, hoping he would never have to find out. That night, Ethan was not looking for a fight. He was searching for survivors. He heard a noise in a nearby alley. He pressed himself against a wall and listened. Someone was groaning in pain? Ethan peeked around the corner and saw a figure on the ground. He thought it was a human at first, but as he got closer he saw blue skin and silver hair. It was a Zareth, and not just any Zareth, but one wearing the black armor of a commander. The Zareth's helmet was off, and her face was twisted with pain. She tried to lift her weapon but dropped it, too weak to hold on. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. The war had taught him to hate the Zareth. They had burned his home and taken his friends, but looking at this wounded commander he did not feel hate. He only saw someone who needed help. He walked closer and spoke softly, trying not to scare her. The Zareth looked up, eyes wide with fear. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely more than a whisper. "Don't hurt me," she said. "Please." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. He took off his gloves and showed her his empty hands. He knelt beside her and saw a deep cut on her side. Blood, thick and dark, stained her armor. Ethan looked for anything to help stop the bleeding. He took a cloth from his pack and pressed it against the wound. The Zareth winced but did not push him away. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Ethan worked quickly. He knew other humans might come soon, and they would not be as kind. When he finished, the Zareth was breathing easier. Ethan sat back and studied her. She was young, maybe not much older than he was. Her name badge read Lyra. He remembered hearing that name over the radio. Lyra was a commander, a strong fighter and a leader. Now she was alone and wounded. Lyra looked at him and asked, "Why are you helping me?" Ethan thought for a moment. He looked at his sword and then at her. "Because not all swords are for killing," he said quietly. "Sometimes you have to choose mercy instead." Lyra seemed surprised by his answer. She reached for a small container at her belt and offered him water. Ethan took it and drank. He was very thirsty, but he made sure to leave some for her. Lyra nodded in thanks and closed her eyes for a moment, trying to rest. As the night went on, they sat together in silence. Far away, explosions shook the ground. The city was still. At war, but here in this dark alley, two enemies were just people trying to survive. Lyra's wound was serious, but she was strong. She talked about her family, far away on the Zareth homeworld, and Ethan listened. In turn, he spoke about his life before the war, about his mother's garden and his little sister. Lyra listened carefully and asked about flowers. She said there were no flowers on her homeworld. Ethan smiled for the first time in days. He promised her that one day he would show her what a garden looked like. Lyra smiled too, even though she was in pain. It was the first time in her life a human had spoken to her with kindness. Time passed slowly. Ethan knew he could not stay much longer. He checked his radio and heard that Zareth forces were retreating. The war was ending here, but no one knew what would come next. Ethan looked at Lyra and knew he had to make a choice. He could leave her, or he could try to help her escape. He helped Lyra to her feet, and together they moved through the city ruins. Ethan led her through back streets and quiet alleys. They hid from search parties, both human and Zareth. Sometimes Lyra would stumble, and Ethan would catch her. Sometimes Ethan would feel weak, and Lyra would help him. They made their way to an old subway station, a place Ethan knew well. There was an exit there, a way out of the city. Before they parted ways, Lyra turned to Ethan. She was pale and tired, but her eyes were bright. "Do you still have that sword?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "Yes," he said. "And I'm saving its last strike." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Thank you, Ethan. I will never forget this." Ethan watched as Lyra disappeared into the darkness. He felt strange inside. He knew he had done the right thing, but he wondered what the future would bring. Would he ever see Lyra again? Would the war really end, or would fighting break out once more? He did not have answers. Ethan made his way back to his group. When they saw him, they asked where he had been. He told them he had been searching for food. No one asked any more questions. That night, as he lay down to sleep, Ethan touched the sword at his side. It was still there, heavy and silent. He remembered his father's words and the promise he had made to Lyra. He did not know when or why he would use the sword's last strike, but he knew it would matter. He hoped it would be for something good. The city remained quiet for the rest of the night. Far away, the sun began to rise, turning the sky from gray to pink. Ethan watched the light spread over the broken buildings. For the first time in a long time, he felt a small hope inside him. Maybe things could change. Maybe people could find peace even after so much pain. Ethan closed his eyes and rested. He dreamed of flowers and gardens, of days before the war. In his dream, he saw Lyra standing in a field of flowers, smiling. The sword was gone from his side, and in its place was a small white flower. Ethan reached for it and felt warmth in his heart. Morning came, and the world went on. Ethan woke up and prepared for another day. The promise he had made would guide him, just as it always had. And somewhere out there, he knew Lyra was still alive, carrying her own hopes for the future. The war was not over yet, but Ethan believed that as long as he remembered mercy and kindness, there was always a chance for something better. After the war, the city was never the same. The buildings that had once touched the sky were now broken. The roads were covered in dust, and grass started to grow in the cracks. People tried to rebuild, but fear and sadness were everywhere. The peace between humans and the Zareth was new and weak. Some people wanted to forget, but others could not let go of their anger. Ethan stayed in the city, working with a group that helped to clean up and bring back electricity. He fixed broken water pipes and helped plant small gardens where houses once stood. The sword never left his side. It became part of who he was. Some people said he was a hero because he had the sword, but Ethan did not feel like a hero. He had lost friends and family just like everyone else. Sometimes at night he dreamed about the war and woke up feeling cold. The humans in the city watched the Zareth carefully. The peace was strange. There were Zareth patrols on some streets and human guards on others. They did not trust each other. When the two groups met, they kept their hands near their weapons. Small fights broke out sometimes, but Ethan tried to stay away from trouble. He wanted peace to last. One day, Ethan heard about a meeting between humans and Zareth leaders. They wanted to talk about rebuilding together. The meeting would be in the old city hall, where the roof was still mostly there. Ethan's friend, a young woman named Clara, asked him to help with the meeting. She trusted him because he had always tried to do the right thing. At the meeting, the air was tense. The Zareth leader was older and had deep scars on his face. The human leader was younger but looked tired. Ethan stood near the wall, listening. The leaders talked about sharing food, water, and work. Some people in the room whispered that it was all lies, that the Zareth could not be trusted. Others said humans were the real problem. Suddenly the doors banged open. Everyone turned. It was Lyra. She wore simple clothes, but Ethan recognized her right away. There was a mark on her face from her old wound, and her eyes looked sharper than before. Some humans stepped back, unsure what she would do. Ethan's heart beat fast, but he stayed calm. Lyra spoke to the group. She talked about her time in the city, about the pain the war had caused both sides. She said she wanted peace, not just for the Zareth, but for humans too. Some people believed her, but others did not. After the meeting, Ethan found her standing, alone in the garden behind City Hall. He walked over, unsure what to say. Lyra smiled at him. "You still have that sword," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "I do, it's always with me." They sat together on a broken bench. Lyra told Ethan about her life after the war. Some Zareth called her a traitor because she had not fought to the last. Others thought she was weak for wanting peace. She said her own people watched her as if she might turn against them. Ethan understood. Some humans did not trust him either because he helped Zareth during the war. Lyra asked him if he missed his old life. Ethan thought about the question. He missed his family, his friends, and the simple days before everything changed. He missed gardens and laughter. Lyra said she missed her home planet where the sky was a different color and music sounded like the wind. They both missed things they could never have again. Days turned into weeks. Ethan and Lyra began to meet more often. Sometimes they walked through the city ruins, picking up old pieces of metal or glass. Other times they helped plant flowers in empty lots. People started to notice. Some whispered behind their backs, but Ethan and Lyra did not care. They felt stronger together. One evening, as the sun went down, Ethan and Lyra stood at the edge of the city. From there, they could see new houses being built. Children played in the street, some with human faces and some with Zareth faces. Lyra pointed at the children and smiled. "Maybe they won't have to remember the war," she said. Ethan hoped she was right. He wanted to believe the future could be different, but not everyone felt the same. There were people who hated the idea of humans and Zareth living together. Some talked about starting a new war, a secret war, to finish what the first one had. Rumors spread about a group that wanted to find old weapons stronger than the sword Ethan carried. This group, made up of both humans and Zareth, did not care about peace. They wanted power. Ethan heard stories about missing supplies, secret meetings, and coded messages. At first, he thought they were only rumors. But then Clara came to him. One night, her face pale and worried, she told him she had seen people sneaking into the old military base outside the city. They carried strange devices and talked about a weapon that could change everything. Ethan felt a cold fear in his heart. He knew that if someone found a weapon like his sword, the fragile peace could end in a single day. Ethan decided to investigate. He could not do it alone, so he asked Lyra for help. She agreed without question. Together they watched the base at night. They saw shadows move between the buildings, heard whispers and the hum of machines. One night they got close enough to see the faces of the people in the group. There were humans and Zareth, all wearing dark clothes and masks. Ethan and Lyra listened to their plans. The group wanted to use an old power cell to bring a forgotten weapon back to life. The leader said they would show everyone who really deserved to rule. He spoke with anger and hatred. Some in the group cheered. Ethan felt sick. He realized how easily fear and pain could turn people into enemies again. He and Lyra hurried back to the city to warn the leaders. But not everyone believed them. Some said it was just old stories meant to keep people afraid. Others thought Ethan and Lyra were making trouble on purpose. Only Clara believed them. She helped spread the warning quietly, telling people to watch out for strangers and to protect their children. That night, Ethan sat with Lyra on the roof of an old school. He looked at the sword beside him. It was still there, shining softly in the moonlight. Lyra noticed his worried face and placed her hand gently on his arm. "You're not alone," she said. Ethan nodded. He knew it was true. But he also knew that peace could disappear in a moment if people were not careful. He promised himself that he would do everything he could to stop another war. If he had to use the sword's last strike, he would use it for something good. He would use it to protect, not to destroy. As the night grew darker, Ethan and Lyra watched the stars together. For now, the city was quiet, but they both understood that the future was not safe yet. There was still hope, and there was still fear. Ethan kept his hand on the sword, feeling its weight, and remembered the promise he had made long ago. He would not break it, no matter what happened next. The days grew shorter as the season changed. The air in the city was colder, and the nights came quickly. People hurried home before dark, locking their doors and closing their windows. Even though there was no fighting, the city felt tense. It was like everyone was waiting for something bad to happen. Ethan woke up early each morning and walked the streets. He checked on the gardens and helped fix broken fences. When he saw Zareth children playing with human children, he smiled. But the smiles did not last long. Sometimes he saw men in dark jackets watching from the shadows. They never spoke to him, but Ethan could feel their eyes on him. Lyra was busy too. She had started to work as a translator for meetings between humans and Zareth. Many people did not speak the same language, and there were mistakes. Lyra was patient. She listened to angry voices and tried to explain things in a calm way. Some people did not trust her, but she kept working. She believed that small steps could make a big change. One evening, Clara came to Ethan's house. She knocked softly on the door and waited until he answered. Her face looked tired and worried. She told Ethan that something strange had happened at the supply depot outside the city. Guards had seen lights late at night. When they checked in the morning, some boxes were missing. The boxes had parts for machines, wires, and power cells. Clara said she had heard the same group was involved, the one that wanted to find old weapons. She asked Ethan if he would come with her to look for clues. Ethan agreed right away. He knew they could not wait any longer. He also told Lyra what had happened, and she wanted to help too. The three friends set out at night, moving quietly through the empty streets. They avoided the main roads and slipped through alleys and old buildings. When they reached the depot, the area was dark and quiet. The only sound was the wind blowing through the broken windows. Ethan led the way, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. They searched the area carefully. In one corner, they found muddy footprints and a torn piece of cloth. Lyra picked it up and studied the design. She said it was from a Zareth work uniform, but it looked newer than most. Clara pointed to a small tool on the ground. It was used to open power cells, and only people with training would know how to use it. Ethan realized the group was more skilled than he had thought. They were careful and smart. He felt a cold shiver. He knew the stolen supplies could be used to make something dangerous. Clara suggested they follow the footprints. The prints led them away from the depot and into an old industrial area where there were many empty buildings. They walked quietly, listening for any sound. At one point they heard voices ahead. Ethan signaled for everyone to hide. They crouched behind a pile of metal beams and listened. The voices belonged to two men. One was human and the other was Zareth. They talked about meeting at the old military base the next night. They spoke in code, but Lyra understood enough to know it was about moving the stolen supplies. The human said they would have everything ready soon. Zareth said he wanted to see the weapon for himself. When the men left, Ethan, Lyra, and Clara waited until the area was quiet again. Then they hurried back to the city. They knew the base would be watched, but they had to find out what was really happening there. The next day, Ethan met with the human and Zareth leaders. He told them about the stolen supplies and what he had heard. Some of the leaders listened, but others just shook their heads. They said there was no proof, only rumors and fear. One leader even said Ethan was only causing trouble because he missed the war. Ethan felt angry and sad. He wished people could see the danger before it was too late. Clara tried to help. She spoke up for Ethan and told the leaders that she trusted him. Lyra spoke softly but clearly, saying that the group was a real threat. She said peace was fragile and everyone had to work together to protect it. In the end, the leaders agreed to send a small team to watch the base, but they would not do anything more unless they saw real proof. Ethan, Lyra, and Clara knew they could not wait. That night, they went to the old military base on their own. The base was big, with tall fences and broken towers. It had not been used since the last battle of the war. Weeds grew through the cracks in the ground, and the buildings were covered in dust. They found a place to hide near the main building and waited. After a while, they saw people moving in the shadows. The group from the night before arrived, carrying bags and boxes. They entered the building and closed the doors behind them. Ethan wanted to get closer. He moved slowly along the side of the building, careful not to make any noise. Lyra and Clara followed. They found a small window with broken glass. Ethan peeked inside and saw the group gathered around a table. On the table was a strange device covered with wires and metal plates. It looked old and dangerous. The leader of the group, a tall human with a deep scar on his face, was speaking. He said they would use the weapon to show everyone that peace was weak. He said people would follow them when they saw real power. The others nodded and cheered. Lara recognized the device. She whispered to Ethan that it was a pulse cannon, an old weapon from the first days of the war. With enough power, it could destroy half the city. Ethan felt sick. He knew they had to stop the group before it was too late. They slipped away from the window and tried to think of a plan. Clara wanted to go back for help, but Ethan said there was no time. Lyra agreed. She said the group would move the weapon. Soon, maybe even tonight, Ethan thought about his sword. It still had the last strike, the power that could not be stopped. He did not want to use it, but he knew he might have no choice. He told Lyra and Clara about his father's words and about the promise he made to only use the sword when there was no other way. Clara put her hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We trust you," she said. "Whatever happens, we're with you." Ethan nodded. He felt stronger with his friends beside him. Together they made a plan. They would wait until the group tried to move the weapon, then create a distraction, and destroy the power cell before it could be used. If the plan failed, Ethan would use the sword's last strike. They waited in the cold night, hidden among the weeds. The minutes passed slowly. Ethan thought about his family and the promise he had made to Lyra long ago. He hoped he would not have to break it. Finally, the group came out of the building, carrying the pulse cannon. They moved quickly, checking the shadows for any sign of trouble. Ethan gave the signal, and Clara ran to the far side of the yard, making noise to draw their attention. The group chased after her, leaving the weapon behind for a moment. Ethan and Lyra ran to the cannon. Lyra pulled out the power cell and tried to break it. The cell was heavy, and her hands shook. Ethan helped her, using his strength to smash the cell on the ground. It cracked and hissed, the energy inside burning the dirt. The group heard the noise and turned back. They shouted in anger and ran toward Ethan and Lyra. The leader raised his weapon, aiming at them. Ethan stepped in front of Lyra, holding the sword. He felt the power inside it, the last strike waiting, but the group stopped when they saw the sword. They knew the stories too. No one wanted to face its power. The leader shouted that they would not give up, that this was not the end, but the group was afraid. They ran into the night, leaving the broken weapon behind. Ethan, Lyra, and Clara stood together, breathing hard. They had stopped the attack, but they knew the danger was not over. The city was safe for now, but the group would try again. Ethan looked at his sword and promised he would only use its last strike to save. Never to destroy. They walked home under the stars, tired but hopeful. They had each other, and that was enough to keep going, no matter what happened next. The morning after the attack at the military base was quiet. The sun rose slowly, sending pale light through the broken windows of the city. Ethan woke before most people and sat on his bed for a long time, thinking about what had happened. His sword lay beside him, still quiet and cold. He remembered how the group had run away when they saw the sword. It had not needed to strike. Its legend was enough for now. Ethan got dressed and went outside. He saw Lyra waiting for him on the steps. She smiled, but her eyes showed she had not slept much either. Clara joined them soon after, her hair still damp from a quick wash. They walked together through the streets, not saying much, each thinking about what might happen next. News of the night's events spread quickly. People talked in low voices about the group and the old weapon. Some were afraid. Others were angry. Some wanted revenge against anyone they did not trust, Zareth or human. Ethan heard a group of men argue in the market, one saying the Zareth could never be trusted, the other blaming humans for starting trouble. Ethan felt tired. He wished people could see that hate only brought more pain. Clara asked Ethan and Lyra to come with her to a meeting with the city leaders. The meeting was in an old library with tall windows and dusty books. The leaders looked worried. They asked for every detail of the attack at the base. Clara explained what they had seen, and Lyra spoke about the stolen supplies and the danger of the weapon. Ethan held his sword on his lap. When it was his turn, he told them about the promise he made to use the last strike only to save lives. He said there had to be a better way than fighting. Some of the leaders agreed, but others were not so sure. One Zareth leader, a tall woman with dark eyes, asked what would happen if the group attacked again. Ethan looked at Lyra. She nodded at him, showing she trusted him. He said, "If there is no other choice, I will use the sword. But only if it means saving someone, not hurting more people." The room was silent for a moment. Then the human leader, a man with gray hair, said they would trust Ethan's judgment. The leaders agreed to put more guards on the city gates. They asked people to report anything strange. Ethan and Lyra promised to keep watching for signs of trouble. Clara offered to help with messages and to organize safe places for families in case of another attack. As the days passed, Ethan noticed the city slowly coming together. People started sharing food and supplies with neighbors. Gardens grew bigger and children played in the streets again. Some Zareth families even moved in with humans for safety. Still, everyone knew the peace was not perfect. The group was still out there, waiting for a chance to strike. One afternoon, a message arrived for Lyra. It was written in the old Zareth script, sealed with black wax. She read it, and her face grew pale. She showed it to Ethan and Clara. The message was a warning. It said that if Lyra did not leave the city, something terrible would happen. The group blamed her for the failed attack. They called her a traitor to her own people and said she would pay for helping humans. Ethan was angry. He wanted to find the group and stop them once and for all, but Lyra said they had to be careful. She did not want to put anyone else in danger. She said she would not run away. She had made her choice long ago, and she would not go back on her promise. Clara thought they should set a trap. She suggested spreading a rumor that Lyra was leaving the city alone at night. Maybe the group would come for her, and they could catch them? Ethan was not sure. He did not like using his friend as bait. But Lyra agreed with Clara. She said it was time to end the fear. The three friends worked out a plan. They told a few trusted people about the rumor and made sure it would spread quietly. That night, Lyra left her house and walked slowly through the empty streets. She wore a hood and kept her head down. Ethan and Clara followed at a distance, hiding in the shadows. Ethan's sword was ready at his side. For a long time, nothing happened. The city was silent. Then, near the old bridge, a group of masked figures stepped out of the darkness and blocked Lyra's path. They carried weapons and moved quickly. Lyra stopped and stood tall, showing she was not afraid. The leader of the group, the tall human with the scar, stepped forward. He shouted that Lyra had betrayed her own kind and would pay the price. The others raised their weapons. Lyra did not move. She spoke calmly, asking them why they were so afraid of peace. She said the war had brought nothing but pain and loss. The group shouted back, saying peace was a lie and the only way to be safe was to control everything with power. Lyra shook her head and told them power built on fear would never last. For a moment, the group hesitated. Then the leader raised his weapon and aimed it at Lyra. Before he could fire, Ethan ran forward, sword drawn. Clara called for help, and a few city guards rushed in from both ends of the bridge. The group fought back, but Ethan's sword glowed with blue light. He did not strike to kill. He used the flat of the blade to knock weapons from hands, moving with speed and skill. Lyra and Clara helped the guards. They worked together, using ropes and nets to trap the attackers. The fight was fast but not as violent as before. Most of the group members threw down their weapons when they saw they were outnumbered. The leader tried to run, but Ethan blocked his path. The man stared at the sword and backed away in fear. Soon the group was captured and taken away by the guards. Lyra thanked Ethan for his bravery, and Clara hugged them both. The city leaders praised their courage and thanked them for stopping the danger. But Ethan felt little joy. He looked at his sword and wondered how many times he would have to use it to keep peace. He knew the group was only part of the problem. There would always be people who hated, people who were afraid. The real fight was not with weapons, but with hearts and minds. Later that night, Ethan sat with Lyra and Clara on the steps outside the city hall. The air was cool and the stars bright above them. They talked quietly about everything that had happened. Lyra said she still believed peace was possible, but it would take time. Clara said the city was stronger now because people had worked together. Ethan listened to his friends and felt hope. He thought about the promise he made to his father and to Lyra. He would not use the sword to hurt, only to protect. He hoped he would never need to use its last strike. As they talked, a small group of children ran past, laughing. Among them were both Human and Zareth. They played without fear, chasing each other across the square. Ethan smiled. Maybe the future would be better after all. The three friends sat together until the sun began to rise, painting the city with new light. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt at peace. He knew the journey was not over, but he also knew he was not alone. Together they would face whatever came next with courage and hope. The sword rested quietly at Ethan's side, waiting for the moment when its last strike would matter most. Until then, Ethan would live each day as if peace was possible and help others believe it too. The days after the capture of the group were quieter than before. People walked more safely in the city. There were fewer arguments and more smiles. The news that the group was stopped made everyone feel better, but Ethan knew that true peace still needed time to grow. The city began to heal in small ways. Old shops opened their doors again. Flowers bloomed in gardens that Ethan and others had planted. The sound of children's laughter became common on the streets. It was the first time since the war that hope felt real. Ethan spent his days working with both Humans and Zareth. He fixed broken windows and helped move heavy things. He planted more gardens, and sometimes he taught the children about different flowers. He always wore his sword at his side. The children often asked to see it. Ethan would kneel and show them the sword, telling them it was not just a weapon but a promise. He said the sword's last strike was not for hurting people. It was meant to protect and save. One sunny morning, Lyra met Ethan near the garden by the river. She looked happy, her eyes shining with new energy. She said the Zareth Council wanted to meet with human leaders to talk about building schools and sharing books. Lyra was chosen to speak for her people, and she wanted Ethan to stand beside her. Ethan agreed. He knew that people from both sides trusted him now, and he wanted to use that trust for something good. Clara joined them, bringing news from the city. She said that many people wanted to help with the meeting. Some brought food and others offered to fix chairs and clean the old meeting hall. It felt different from before. People wanted to work together. Ethan thought that maybe this was how peace started, not with big speeches, but with small acts of kindness. The day of the meeting arrived. The hall was filled with people, both Human and Zareth. Some looked nervous, but most were curious and hopeful. Lyra spoke first, her voice calm and strong. She talked about her memories of war and her dream for peace. She spoke about the children who played together and the gardens that had grown in empty spaces. She told everyone that it was possible to change if they were brave enough to try. Ethan stood next to her. When it was his turn, he did not talk about the sword or the battles. He spoke about promises. He said that he promised his father and his friends that he would only use his strength to help others. He promised to protect people, not fight them. He asked everyone in the room to make their own promises, to be honest, to help when they could, and to listen to each other. The human leader, the man with gray hair, stood up and spoke. He said he was proud of the city and of the new hope. He welcomed Zareth and said that the past could not be changed, but the future could be better. The Zareth leader, the woman with dark eyes, said the same. She thanked Ethan, Lyra, and Clara for showing what was possible. After the meeting, people stayed to talk. They shared food and stories. Children played outside while their parents laughed inside. For the first time, the hall was filled with light and voices, not fear. Ethan stood by the door and watched everyone. He felt proud and a little surprised by how far they had come, but peace was not perfect. There were still some who were angry. One night, someone threw a rock through the window of Lara's house. Another time, a Zareth boy was pushed in the market. Ethan and Lyra visited them both. They listened and helped where they could. They told everyone that change took time, but it was worth it. Then, one evening, trouble returned. A small group of men and women, both human and Zareth, broke into the city's power station. They wanted to shut down the lights and scare people into fighting again. The alarm rang out, and people ran to see what was wrong. Ethan heard the call and hurried to the power station with Lyra and Clara. When they arrived, the group was inside, breaking machines and yelling. They wanted to make the city dark again, to remind everyone of the fear from the war. The city guards tried to stop them, but were afraid of the weapons the group carried. Ethan saw that one of the men had a blaster and was aiming it at the guards. Ethan stepped forward, his sword in his hand. He called out to the group, telling them to stop. The man with the blaster turned and shouted that peace was a lie and that only power mattered. He threatened to destroy the machines and hurt anyone who tried to stop him. The other members of the group looked uncertain, but the man did not lower his weapon. Lyra moved beside Ethan and spoke loudly to everyone in the room. She reminded them of what they had seen in the city, the gardens, the laughter, the hope. She asked if they really wanted to go back to darkness and fear. Some people lowered their heads. One woman dropped her weapon and began to cry. The man with the blaster did not listen. He pointed his weapon at Lyra. Ethan felt the power of the sword in his hands. He remembered his promise. There was no other way. He stepped in front of Lyra. The man fired. The blast hit the sword. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The sword glowed with bright blue light, brighter than ever before. Ethan felt the energy move through him, strong and warm. He swung the sword not at the man, but at the floor between them. The energy from the sword burst out in a wave, creating a shield of light. The blast from the man's weapon bounced off the shield and hit the wall, leaving a burn but hurting no one. The shield spread through the room, gently pushing the attackers back. Their weapons fell from their hands. No one was hurt, but everyone was shocked. The sword's light faded. Ethan looked at the blade. It was empty and dull, the last strike finally used. The sword would never shine again. Ethan felt sadness, but also peace. He had kept his promise. The guards moved quickly and arrested the attackers. The other people in the room stood quietly, looking at Ethan and Lyra. They understood what had happened. The sword's last strike had saved lives, not taken them. The next day, the city gathered in the main square. People came from all over, the old and the young, humans and Zareth. They wanted to see the sword and to thank Ethan. The city leaders asked Ethan to place the sword in a new monument at the center of the square. It would be a reminder that real power was not in weapons, but in the courage to protect and the will to forgive. Ethan stood with Lyra and Clara. He placed the sword in the monument. People laid flowers at its base. Children looked at it with wide eyes, hearing the story of its last strike. Ethan told them that what mattered most was not the sword, but the promise to care for each other. As the sun set, Ethan and Lyra walked through the city. The lights were on and music played from the houses. Gardens grew and peace was stronger than before. They knew there would be hard days again. But they also knew that people could choose hope over hate. Ethan smiled at Lyra. She smiled back. Together they walked on, ready to help build a new world, one where the greatest strike of all was the one that saved, not destroyed.